On my 18th birthday, I came back from school expecting a surprise. I wasn't expecting much. My family had never been the type to celebrate me loudly. No balloons taped to the walls. No group hugs. No social media posts about how proud they were. But still, 18 felt different. 18 was supposed to mean something. I walked home slower than usual that day. My backpack hanging off one shoulder, the sun warm on my skin. My classmates had made a big deal about turning 18 talking about freedom. Adulthood finally being taken seriously. One girl brought cupcakes for everyone. Another guy bragged about how his parents were buying him a car. I didn't envy them. Not really. I just thought maybe, for once, my family would acknowledge me. Maybe dinner would be something other than leftovers. Maybe my mom would cook my favorite meal. Maybe my dad would nod at me in that quiet way of his that meant approval. Maybe my siblings wouldn't roll their eyes when my name came up. Something small. Something normal. As I turned the corner onto our street, I even let myself smile a little. That was my first mistake. The house looked the same from the outside. Same peeling paint. Same cracked front steps. Same window where my younger sibling used to watch for me when I came home late. Nothing felt off until I opened the door. That's when I saw them. 6 large black trash bags lined up against the wall, right where the shoe rack used to be. For a second, my brain didn't connect the dots. Trash bags weren't unusual in our house. My mom liked to declutter when she was angry. Usually that meant throwing out things that belonged to me. But these weren't random. I recognized them immediately. My jacket sleeve was sticking out of one bag. The blue hoodie I wore when I was cold, even though it had a hole in the pocket. Another bag had the corner of my pillow poking out. The one I'd had since I was a kid. I could see the faded pattern through the plastic. My chest tightened. I didn't step inside. I just stood there, frozen, holding the door open. "Mom," I called. My voice sounded strange to my own ears, thin and unsure. She appeared from the kitchen a moment later, wiping her hands on a dish. Towel like she just finished doing something important. She looked calm, not angry, not guilty, just done. "Oh, you're home," she said. That was it. No smile, no hug, no happy birthday. I asked what the bags were. She glanced at them, then back at me, as if the explanation should be obvious. "You're 18 now," she said. "You're an adult." I laughed because the alternative was screaming. "Okay," I said. "So?" She sighed, the way she always did when she thought I was being difficult. "So it's time you learned how the real world works." That was the moment my birthday officially stopped being my birthday and turned into an eviction notice. Before I could say anything, my dad came into the hallway too. He didn't look at me. He looked at the bags. "We've talked about this," he said, like this was a conversation I'd missed. "You can't stay here forever." I told them I wasn't trying to stay forever. I was still in school. I had exams coming up. I didn't even have a job yet because they told me to focus on my studies. My mom crossed her arms. "We fed you," she said. "We clothed you. We put a roof over your head." That's more than a lot of parents do. The words hit me harder than I expected. "Fed you." Like I was a stray animal they'd grown tired of. I asked them where they expected me to go. My dad finally looked at me then. His expression was blank, almost bored. "You'll figure it out," he said. That's adulthood. I stood there, staring at the people who had raised me, wondering when I had stopped being their child and started being a burden. I reminded them it was my birthday. My mom scoffed. "You should be grateful we waited until you were 18, she said. Legally, we didn't have to. That sentence still echoes in my head years later. Legally, not emotionally, not morally, just legally. I picked up one of the trash bags with shaking hands. It was heavier than I expected. My life compressed into plastic and knots. Inside those bags were every piece of clothing I owned, my school notebooks, old photos I didn't even know they'd kept, the cheap phone charger I paid for myself. Nothing fragile, nothing valuable. Just proof that I had existed in that house. I asked if I could at least stay the night. My mom shook her head. "No, you'll just get comfortable again." My younger sibling watched from the staircase, eyes wide but silent. They didn't say anything. Neither did my older sibling, who sat on the couch scrolling through their phone like this wasn't happening. No one defended me. No one asked if I was okay. I dragged the bags outside one by one. Each trip felt heavier than the last. Neighbors walked past. Someone waved. Someone else looked away. By the time I finished, my hands were raw, my throat tight, my mind numb. My dad closed the door behind me. I stood on the front steps with 6 trash bags and nowhere to go. That was the day my family taught me exactly how much I was worth to them. And it was only the beginning. I didn't leave right away. After the door shut behind me, I just stood there on the front steps, staring at it like it might reopen if I waited long enough. Like maybe this was some kind of test. Maybe my mom would suddenly remember it was my birthday and call me back inside. Maybe my dad would sigh and say I could stay just one more night. The door stayed closed. The house went quiet. That silence was louder than any argument we'd ever had. I sat down on the steps beside the trash bags. The plastic crinkled under my weight, making me flinch. I remember thinking how ridiculous I must look, an 18-year-old kid, dumped on the sidewalk with their life packed like garbage on collection day. I checked my phone. No messages, no birthday texts, no missed calls. I scrolled through my contacts, from hovering over names, friends, classmates, people I laughed with at school, people who assumed I went home to something warm and stable every day. I didn't know how to explain this to anyone. Hey, it's my birthday and my parents just kicked me out. Can I crash at your place? The words felt too heavy to send, so I didn't. I waited until the sun started to dip lower, until the streetlights flickered on one by one. Neighbors came home from work, carrying groceries, unlocking doors, living normal lives. A woman across the street smiled at me and said, "Long day." I nodded. She went inside. Eventually, I realized I couldn't sit there forever. If I stayed, someone would call the police, or my parents would. Or worse, they'd open the door just to tell me to leave again. So I grabbed the bags. Dragging them down the street felt like dragging proof of my rejection behind me. The bags scraped against the pavement, tearing slightly at the corners. I kept stopping to adjust my grip, my arms already sore. I didn't have a plan. I just walked. I walked until the houses thinned out and the streetlights grew farther apart. I walked until my legs burned and my throat felt tight from holding back tears. I walked because stopping meant thinking, and thinking meant breaking. When I finally stopped, I was in a small park a few blocks away. It wasn't much, just a patch of grass, a few benches, a rusted swing set. I sat down on a bench and pulled my jacket tighter around myself. That was the first night. I realized hunger feels different when you don't know when you'll eat again. I'd skip lunch that day, saving the little money I had. Dinner was usually at home. Now there was no dinner. Just the hollow ache in my stomach and the smell of someone grilling meat somewhere nearby. I ate a packet of crackers I found at the bottom of one bag. They tasted like dust, but I chewed slowly, pretending it was a meal. I didn't sleep much. Every sound made me tense. A car passing, someone laughing, a dog barking. I kept my hand on my bags, terrified someone would steal them. As if there was anything worth stealing. At some point, I curled up on the bench, my head resting on my backpack, my knees tucked to my chest. The cold seeped through my clothes. I shivered, teeth chattering. I kept thinking about my family, warm in their beds. I wondered if they were talking about me. I wondered if they felt relieved. Morning came too fast. The sky turned pale gray, and the world woke up like nothing had happened. Joggers passed me, earbuds in. A man walked his dog. A mother pushed a stroller. No one stopped. I gathered my things before anyone could ask questions. School felt impossible, but it was the only place I knew how to go, so I went. I washed my face in the school bathroom, staring at my reflection like I was looking at a stranger. My eyes were red. My hair was a mess. I smelled like cold air and plastic. I sat in class and pretended to listen. When a teacher wished me happy birthday because the attendance system flagged it, I almost laughed, almost cried. At lunch, I sat alone and drank water to quiet my stomach. That was when I finally texted someone. Not a close friend. Not someone I trusted deeply. Just someone I thought wouldn't ask too many questions. Hey, weird question. Do you know anywhere cheap I could stay for a bit? The reply came a few minutes later. Like a hostel, or? I typed and erased my response 3 times before sending. My parents kicked me out. There was a pause. Then, "Oh damn, I'm sorry. You can crash on our couch for a couple nights if you want." I read that message over and over. A couple nights. It wasn't home. It wasn't permanent, but it was a roof. That night, I carried my trash bags onto a bus and rode across town, my heart pounding the entire way. I kept expecting someone to stop me to ask why I was carrying my life in garbage bags. No one did. Their apartment was small and crowded, but warm. Their mom gave me a blanket without asking questions. Their dad nodded at me like this was normal. I slept on the couch, curled up, afraid to take up too much space. In the middle of the night, I woke up crying quietly into the pillow, trying not to make a sound. I told myself this was temporary. I told myself I'd figure it out. What I didn't know yet was how fast temporary turns into a way of life when no one is waiting for you to come home. And what I didn't know, what my family didn't know, was that this was the moment something inside me changed forever. Because once you survive your first night with nothing, you stop being afraid of losing everything you already have. The couch became my world. At first, it was supposed to be temporary 2 nights, maybe 3. That was what they said. And I believed them because I had to. I told myself I'd figure something out quickly. Get a job, save money, find a room to rent, become an adult overnight, like my parents said I should. But adulthood doesn't arrive with instructions. It arrives with exhaustion. The apartment belonged to my classmates' family, 2 parents, 3 kids, 1 bathroom, and a living room that barely fit the couch I slept on. Every morning, I woke up before everyone else so I wouldn't be in the way. I folded the blanket neatly, stacked my bags in a corner, and tried to make myself invisible. Invisible was safe. Invisible didn't get you kicked out again. I showered quickly, always last, using whatever soap was already there. I wore the same few outfits on rotation, washing them in the sink at night and hanging them over chairs to dry. My trash bag stayed tied, like I was always ready to leave at a moment's notice. Because I was. The first week passed in a blur of school, awkward smiles, and constant anxiety. I said thank you so often it became a reflex. Thank you for letting me stay. Thank you for the food. Thank you for the blanket. Thank you for not asking questions. I could feel the tension growing anyway. Not from my classmate, they were kind, genuinely so, but from the parents. They never said anything outright, but I noticed the looks. The way conversations paused when I entered the room. The way groceries seemed to disappear faster. The way the couch was suddenly needed during the day. One night, I overheard their mom whispering to their dad in the kitchen. They didn't even bring a suitcase, she said. Everything's in trash bags. Well, he replied, that says a lot about their parents. I pressed my face into the pillow and pretended to be asleep. After 2 weeks, my classmate sat beside me on the couch, hands clasped together, clearly uncomfortable. My parents were asking, they began, if you've heard from your family yet. I shook my head. Maybe you should reach out, they suggested gently, just to see if things have cooled down. That night, I did. I called my mom first. She didn't answer. I called my dad. He picked up on the third ring. Hello, he said, flat and distant. I told him where I was. I told him I was trying to find a job. I told him I just needed a little more time. He sighed. You know, he said, most kids would be grateful we raised them at all. That word again. Grateful. I told him I was grateful. I said it quickly, desperately, like it was a password that might unlock something. I just don't understand why you kicked me out, I said. It was my birthday. He laughed. A short, humorless sound. You think birthdays mean something? He said. We fed you for 18 years. We didn't owe you anything else. I asked if I could come home. There was a pause. No, he said. If we let you back, you'll never grow up. Then he added, you should be grateful we didn't throw you out sooner. The line went dead. I sat there staring at my phone, my hands shaking. Fed you. They always came back to that. Like food was love. Like survival was kindness. I started working 2 weeks later. It was a small job at a convenience store, long hours. Low pay, constant standing. I took whatever shifts they gave. Me, nights, weekends, holidays. I smiled at customers even when my feet screamed. And my stomach growled. My first paycheck felt unreal. I held it in my hands like it might disappear. That money wasn't much, but it was mine. Proof that I could exist without them. I paid for my own food. I bought cheap shampoo and soap. I replaced my cracked phone charger. I started looking for a room to rent. Every listing felt impossible. Too expensive. Too far. Too many requirements. First and last month's rent. References required. No students. I slept less. I worked more. And through it all, my family stayed silent. Until they didn't. One afternoon, I got a text from my mom. Your aunt asked about you. That was it. No, how are you? No apology. I replied carefully. I'm okay. 3 dots appeared. Then disappeared. Then she sent. You know, she thinks we were too soft on you. I stared at the message, disbelief turning slowly into something bitter. Soft. I didn't reply. The next message came a few minutes later. You should be grateful we didn't ask you to pay rent while you lived here. I laughed out loud in the break room at work, startling a coworker. Pay rent? With what money? They hadn't allowed me to work while I lived with them. They'd insisted school came first. Now they were rewriting history like they'd done me a favor. That was when I realized something important. They were never going to see themselves as the villains. In their story, I was the ungrateful child, the burden, the one who took and dared to want more. So I stopped trying to explain. I stopped trying to justify my existence. I focused on surviving. A month later, I moved into a tiny room in a shared apartment. The walls were thin. The mattress was lumpy. The rent ate most of my paycheck, but it was mine. The day I carried my trash bags into that room, I untied them for the first time. I folded my clothes into a drawer. I placed my pillow on the bed. I sat on the floor and cried, not because I was sad, but because I had finally arrived somewhere that didn't feel like borrowed space. I didn't tell my family. They found out anyway. Word travels fast when people want it to. My dad called me that night. So you think you're independent now, he said. I am, I replied. He scoffed. Don't forget where you came from, he said. We fed you when you had nothing. I closed my eyes. Good night, I said, and hung up. That was the first time I ended a conversation with him on my own terms. It wouldn't be the last, because years later when they were hungry in ways food couldn't fix, they would come back to me. And this time, I would be the one deciding what they were fed. The first winter hit me harder than I expected. Not because of the cold, I could handle that. I'd learned how to layer clothes, how to keep the heat low, how to wrap myself in blankets and pretend it was enough. What I wasn't prepared for was how lonely winter feels when there's no place you're expected to return to. No one waiting. No one asking if you made it home safe. My room was barely bigger than a closet. One narrow window, one bed pressed against the wall, a single bulb hanging from the ceiling. When it snowed, the cold crept in through the cracks, settling into my bones. I slept in a hoodie and socks, my breath fogging in the air on the coldest nights. I worked more hours to afford heating, which meant I was homeless. School during the day, work at night, sleep in between when I could. Some days, the exhaustion blurred everything together. I missed meals. I forgot assignments. I zoned out in class, my mind drifting to places I didn't want it to go. That's when my family started showing up again. Not in person, in messages. My mom texted first. "It's getting cold. Hope you're dressed properly." I stared at the screen, stunned by the casualness of it, like she hadn't kicked me out, like concern after the fact counted as care. I replied with one word, "I'm fine." A week later, my dad called. "I heard you moved," he said. "Yes, you didn't think to tell us." I almost laughed. "You didn't think to ask," I said. There was a pause, then irritation. "Watch your tone," he snapped. "We're still your parents." Parents. The word felt foreign. I hung up without replying. The holidays came and went quietly. No invitations. No come home for dinner. Just photos posted online. My siblings smiling around a table I no longer belonged to. People commented things like asterisk beautiful family asterisk and asterisk so blessed asterisk. I muted their accounts. At work, a coworker offered me leftovers one night. I accepted without pride or shame, just gratitude. I ate standing up in the break room, savoring warmth. That night, I realized something painful but freeing. I was surviving, not thriving, not comfortable, but alive. And every day I made it through without them felt like a small rebellion. Then came the call that changed everything. It was late, almost midnight. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. My mother's name lit up the screen. I almost ignored it. Almost. "What is it?" I asked. Her voice sounded strained. "Your father lost his job." I sat up slowly. "What?" I asked. "They're downsizing," she said. "It wasn't his fault." I didn't say anything. She continued, voice tight. "Things are difficult right now." I waited. She cleared her throat. "We might need some help." There it was. The first crack. I thought of the nights I'd gone to bed hungry. The times I'd cried quietly so no one would hear. The way they told me to be grateful for being fed. "What kind of help?" I asked. "Just a little support," she said. "Until things stabilize." I felt something cold settle in my chest. The irony was almost unbearable. "You kicked me out with nothing," I said calmly. "You told me you didn't owe me anything." "That was different," she said quickly. "You were young. This is family." I smiled, though she couldn't see it. "Funny," I said. "That's not what you said when I was 18. She went quiet. "I'll think about it," I said, and hung up. That night, I didn't sleep. Not from fear, from clarity. Because now I understood something completely. They didn't miss me. They missed what I could provide. And someday when I was strong enough, stable enough, untouchable enough, I would decide exactly what they deserved from me. Winter ended eventually. I didn't go back. And when spring came, so did the first real step toward the life they never thought I'd have. Saying no sounds simple. It's one word, 2 letters, a closed door. But when you've spent your entire life being taught that your worth is measured by how useful you are to other people, especially to your family, no, feels like betrayal. After my mother's call, I didn't hear from them for a while. A few weeks passed, then another month. Spring settled in, slow and quiet. The snow melted. The days got longer. People started talking about plans again, summer jobs, trips, futures. I focused on mine. I picked up extra shifts. I applied for a better paying job. I learned how to budget down to the last coin. I learned which meals stretched the farthest, how to repair clothes instead of replacing them, how to live without assuming someone would save me if things went wrong. And slowly, something unexpected happened. I stopped waiting for my phone to ring. That was when my family noticed. My dad showed up at my door one evening without warning. I'd just gotten home from work, shoes kicked off, hair still smelling like fryer oil. When I opened the door and saw him standing there, my heart jumped straight into my throat. He looked smaller than I remembered. Not physically, just diminished. His jacket was worn, his eyes tired. "You didn't answer my calls," he said, stepping inside without asking. I let him. We stood in my tiny room, the silence thick and awkward. He looked around, taking it all in: the bed, the desk, the single chair. "This is where you live?" he asked. "Yes." He shook his head. "You could have had it easier," he said, "if you hadn't been so stubborn." I laughed. It slipped out before I could stop it. "Stubborn," I repeated. "You threw me out." He waved a hand dismissively. "We pushed you to grow." That sentence did something to me. It snapped the last thread of guilt holding me in place. "No," I said, my voice steady. "You abandoned me." His face hardened. "We fed you for 18 years, he said sharply. "You act like we abused you." There it was again. Fed you. I took a breath. "You didn't feed me out of love," I said. "You fed me because you had to. And the moment you didn't have to anymore, you stopped." He stared at me like he didn't recognize the person in front of him. "We need help," he said finally. "Just for a while." I crossed my arms. "With what?" I asked. "Money," he said. "Your siblings are still at home. Things are tight." I thought of the couch, the park bench, the hunger. "No," I said. His eyebrows shot up. "No," he repeated. "No," I said again. "I can't help you." "You won't help us," he corrected. I met his gaze. "I won't," I agreed. His face twisted with anger. "After everything we did for you," he snapped. "This is how you repay us." I felt the old instinct rise in me, the urge to apologize, to explain, to fix it. I crushed it. "I didn't ask to be born," I said quietly. "And I didn't ask to be discarded." He left without another word. My hands shook for a long time after the door closed. That night, guilt tried to eat me alive. What kind of child refuses to help their parents? A child who learned the hard way that love with conditions isn't love at all. The messages started after that. My mother, my aunt, even a cousin I barely spoke to. Family helps family. They're struggling. You wouldn't exist without them. Each message felt like a hook, trying to pull me back into the role they'd assigned me. The grateful child who owes their life to people who never protected them. I didn't respond. Weeks passed, then months, and something incredible happened. The guilt faded. In its place grew something stronger, self-respect. I started a new job that summer, better hours, better pay. I moved into a slightly larger place. I bought a real suitcase and threw the trash bags away. That felt symbolic. I wasn't disposable anymore. One evening, while unpacking groceries, my phone buzzed again. My mother. "We're going to lose the house." I sat down slowly. For a moment, I imagined it the house I'd been kicked out of, empty. The rooms where I'd grown up stripped bare. I felt nothing. I typed carefully. "I'm sorry you're going through that." 3 dots appeared. Then, "Can you help?" I stared at the message for a long time. Then I typed, "No." And for the first time in my life, saying it didn't hurt. Because I was finally learning a truth they never taught me. You are not cruel for refusing to bleed for people who taught you to starve. And someday much later, when they would sit at my table asking for more than money, I would remember this moment. Because what I fed them then wouldn't be kindness. It would be consequence. Success doesn't arrive with fireworks. For me, it came quietly. A promotion, a better paycheck, a savings account that stopped sitting at zero, a routine that didn't involve panic every time my phone buzzed with a bill reminder. I didn't wake up one day feeling powerful. I woke up one day feeling stable. And that was enough. By my early 20s, I was doing something my family never thought I could do. Standing on my own without asking them for anything. I finished school. I kept my job. I built a life that didn't collapse every time something went wrong. I didn't tell them. They found out anyway. They always do. It started with a comment from my aunt on a photo I posted online, nothing flashy. Just me smiling in front of my new place. "Looks like you're doing well for yourself." The message from my mother came the same night. "Your aunt says you've been posting pictures. Must be nice." I ignored it. A week later, my dad called. "You didn't tell us you got a better job," he said. Irritation laced through his voice. "I didn't know I had to," I replied. "Well, we're your family," he said. "We should know these things." I smiled to myself. Funny how family mattered now. He cleared his throat. "So, how much are you making?" There it was. The question they really cared about. "I'm doing okay," I said. "That's vague," he replied. "You know, if you're comfortable, you could help us get back on our feet." I thought of all the times they told me to figure it out. "I did," I said. "You should too." Silence. Then anger. "You think you're better than us now?" He snapped. "No," I said calmly. "I think I survived you." He hung up. The next few months were filled with subtle guilt attempts. My mom sent photos of empty cupboards. My aunt talked about hard times. My siblings suddenly remembered my birthday. I watched it all from a distance, detached, observant. I noticed how none of them asked how I was, how I'd managed, what it took to get here. They didn't want my story. They wanted my resources. One day, my mother showed up at my door again, this time with tears. "We're losing everything," she said. "We need you." I looked at her, really looked. This was the woman who packed my clothes into trash bags. The woman who told me to be grateful for being fed. "What do you need?" I asked. Her face lit up. "Money," she said. "Help with food. Just until we recover." I nodded slowly. "I'll think about it," I said. She squeezed my hands, hope flooding her face. That night, I sat at my kitchen table and thought about hunger. Real hunger. The kind that keeps you awake. The kind that teaches you how disposable you are. And I made a decision. I would help them. But not the way they expected. Because the truth is, I had fed myself for years without them. And now it was my turn to decide what nourishment really meant. I didn't give them money. That was the first thing I decided. Money would have been easy. A transfer. A receipt. Something they could spend and forget, then come back for more when it ran out. Money would have kept the power. Dynamic exactly where they wanted. It me as a resource, them as entitled. I wasn't doing that again. Instead, I sent my mother a message. You can come over for dinner. She replied almost immediately. Dinner. Yes, I wrote. I'll cook. There was a pause longer than usual. Then, that's very kind of you. Kind. The word sat strangely with me, because kindness had never been the currency in our relationship. Obligation had guilt, control. But I kept the tone neutral. Saturday at 6. She sent a thumbs up emoji. I stared at my phone for a long time after that. I told myself I was calm, that I was doing this rationally, that this wasn't revenge. But my hands shook when I set the phone down. All week, I prepared. Not obsessively, just deliberately. I cleaned my apartment slowly, methodically, taking note of everything I built on my own. The furniture I bought secondhand and repaired myself. The books on my shelf. The fridge that actually had food in it. Food I'd earned. On Friday night, I went grocery shopping. I walked the aisles without rushing, without calculating every cent the way I used to. I chose ingredients carefully, thoughtfully, not expensive, not extravagant, intentional. Saturday came faster than I expected. At 5:30, my phone buzzed. Asterisk, your father and your siblings are coming too. Asterisk, my mother wrote. Asterisk, we're family after all. Asterisk, I exhaled slowly. Of course they were. I didn't reply. At 6 sharp, there was a knock at my door. When I opened it, I was met with a sight I hadn't seen in years. My entire family standing in the hallway, looking at me like they were trying to assess something. My father's eyes flicked past me, scanning my apartment. My mother smiled too widely. My siblings avoided my gaze. Well, my dad said, clapping his hands together. Look at you. I stepped aside and let them in. They moved through my space like tourists, touching things, commenting. Nice place, my mother said. Much better than before. Before. As if my first place hadn't been a survival bunker. I led them to the table. 4 chairs. Plates already set. Dinner was simple. Rice, vegetables, a hearty stew. The kind of meal that fills you up without flair. The kind of meal I learned to make when I was counting coins. We sat. For a moment, no one spoke. Then my father cleared his throat. You've done well, he said. We always knew you would. I almost laughed. Always. My mother reached for the serving spoon. This smells good, she said. You must have learned a lot since you left. Since I was thrown out, she meant. I served them first. I watched their plates fill. I waited until everyone had food before sitting down myself. Old habits. We ate in silence at first. The kind that grows heavy, not comfortable. I noticed how fast they ate. How my siblings scraped their plates. How my father took seconds without asking. Hunger changes people. Halfway through the meal, my mother sighed contentedly. I forgot how nice it is to have a proper dinner, she said. My father nodded. Food's been tight, he admitted. We've had to make sacrifices. I set my fork down. This was it. I know, I said calmly. That's why I invited you. They all looked at me. I wanted to feed you, I continued. The way I fed myself when I had nothing. My mother's smile faltered slightly. I don't understand, she said. I met her eyes. When I was 18, you told me I should be grateful you fed me, I said. Do you remember that? My father shifted in his seat. That was different, he said automatically. No, I replied. It wasn't. The table went quiet. I stood up and walked to the kitchen. From the counter, I picked up a small envelope and brought it back. I placed it in the center of the table. What's this? My brother asked. A receipt, I said. My mother frowned and opened it. Inside was a neatly typed list. Every month, every year, food costs, rent, utilities, transportation, everything I'd spent to survive after they kicked me out. At the bottom was a single line. Paid in full. My father stared at it, confused. What is this supposed to mean? He asked. I sat back down. It means I don't owe you anything, I said evenly. Not for food. Not for shelter. Not for raising me. My mother's hands trembled. We didn't mean, she started. I know exactly what you meant, I said. You fed me because you had to. You stopped when you didn't. My sister pushed her plate away, appetite gone. My father scoffed. So what is this? He demanded. Some kind of performance? I shook my head. It's closure, I said. You said feeding me was a debt I owed. So I wanted you to experience what it feels like to be fed without love. Their faces changed then. Slowly. Understanding crept in. You invited us here just to say this. My mother whispered. No, I said. I invited you because you were hungry. I gestured to the empty plates. And now you've eaten. My father's jaw tightened. And help, he asked. After this, I stood. This, I said, was the help. I walked to the door and opened it. They didn't move at first. Then, one by one, they stood. My siblings wouldn't look at me. My mother's eyes were wet. My father looked furious and smaller than ever. As they left, my mother turned back. You're cruel, she said. I smiled, not unkindly. No, I replied. I'm fed. The door closed. I leaned against it, heart pounding. hands shaking not with fear, but with release. Because, for the first time in my life, I had given them something they truly couldn't swallow. The truth. The silence after they left was loud. Not the peaceful kind, the kind that presses in on your ears. That makes you acutely aware of every breath, every heartbeat. I stood there for a long time with my hand still on the door handle, listening to the echo of their footsteps fading down the hallway. Then I locked the door. My legs gave out almost immediately. I slid down until I was sitting on the floor, back against the wood, knees pulled to my chest. I hadn't planned for how final asterisk it would feel. I'd imagined anger, shouting, maybe tears. I hadn't expected the hollow ache in my chest or the strange, weightless calm that followed. Like something old and heavy had finally been set down. I cleaned the table slowly that night, washed the plates they'd eaten from, threw away leftovers. Each small action grounded me, kept my thoughts from spiraling. I slept deeply for the first time in weeks. The fallout started the next morning. My phone exploded with messages before I even made coffee. My aunt was first. How could you embarrass your parents like that? Then cousin. They're devastated. You went too far. Then my sister. Mom's been crying all night. Was that really necessary? I read them all without responding. I expected the guilt to come roaring back, the old instinct to apologize, to fix things, to make myself small again so others could be comfortable. It didn't. Instead, I felt something colder, clearer. Resolve. My parents had told their version of the story quickly. I could tell by the wording how the focus wasn't on what they'd done, but on how I'd made them feel. Not once did anyone mention the trash bags. Not once did anyone mention the park bench, the couch, the hunger. Just my cruelty. Just my disrespect. I turned my phone face down. At work, I couldn't concentrate. Every time my phone buzzed, my stomach clenched. By lunchtime, I had missed 3 calls from my mother. I stepped outside and finally answered. What do you want? I asked. Her voice broke immediately. I raised you, she sobbed. How could you do this to us? I closed my eyes. You raised me until you didn't, I said quietly. We were struggling. She cried. We didn't know it would get that bad. You didn't care enough to find out, I replied. There was a long pause, then anger bled into her voice. You think one dinner makes you superior? She snapped. You think you're above us now? No, I said. I think I'm done being beneath you. She hung up. The messages kept coming. People I barely spoke to suddenly had opinions about my character, about forgiveness, about family. I noticed something interesting. None of them offered to help my parents. They just wanted me to. That told me everything. 2 days later, my dad showed up again. This time, he didn't knock. He pounded. When I opened the door, he pushed past me like he owned the place. You humiliated us, he said, voice shaking with fury. In our own child's home. I laughed softly. My home, I corrected. He turned on me. You think feeding us that meal makes you righteous? He demanded. You think you taught us some lesson? I met his glare without flinching. I think you finally heard me, I said. You could have helped, he said. You had the means. I still do, I replied. And I chose not to. His face flushed. Ungrateful, he spat. I felt the word bounce off me like it had lost all its power. I paid my debt, I said. You said food was something I owed you for. Now we're even. He stared at me like I'd struck him. This isn't over, he said. It is for me, I replied. I opened the door. He hesitated, then left. That night, I blocked them. All of them. Not out of spite. Out of self-preservation. Weeks passed. The world didn't end. My parents didn't starve. They didn't become homeless overnight. They figured something out because adults always do when they have no other choice. Just like I had. I heard through the grapevine that my dad took a lower-paying job. That my siblings started working. That my mother complained endlessly about how unfair everything was. I felt nothing. Then, one evening, I received a message from an unknown number. I didn't know it was that bad. I'm sorry. It was my youngest sibling. I stared at the screen for a long time. That apology wasn't for my parents. It was for me. And for the first time, I let myself cry. Because while feeding my family Truth They couldn't swallow had closed one chapter, it had opened another. One where I no longer had to carry the weight of their choices. I had fed myself. I had survived. And now, I was finally free to decide what kind of person I wanted to be without them defining it. The message from my sibling sat on my phone for 3 days. I read it over and over, dissecting every word, every pause, every implication. I wasn't sure what scared me more, the possibility that it was sincere, or the possibility that it was another attempt to pull me back into a role I'd spent years escaping. I didn't know it was that bad. I'm sorry. No excuses. No justifications. No but. That alone made it different. I finally replied with a single question. What do you mean you didn't know? The response came slowly. They told us you left because you wanted to. They said you were being dramatic. I believed them. That didn't surprise me. It hurt, but it didn't surprise me. My parents had always been careful about controlling the narrative. They couldn't admit to throwing me out because that would mean admitting fault. So they reframed it as independence, choice, my idea. I asked if they remembered the trash bags. There was a long pause. Then, no, they never said anything about that. My chest tightened. I sent them a photo. Not of the trash bags, I didn't have one, but of the list I'd given my parents. The receipts. The years of survival itemized into numbers and dates. Another long pause. I don't know what to say. One typed and erased several replies before settling on honesty. You don't have to say anything. I just needed you to know the truth. A few minutes later, I believe you. That sentence did something to me. It didn't fix the past. It didn't undo the nights I'd gone hungry or the years of feeling disposable. But it mattered. Because, for the first time, someone from my family saw me not as an ungrateful child, not as a resource but as a person who had been wronged. We met for coffee a week later. They looked nervous when they walked in, scanning the room like they expected our parents to burst through the door at any moment. We sat across from each other, hands wrapped around mugs we didn't touch. I'm scared, they admitted. If I take your side, they'll turn on me. I nodded. I know, I said. That's what they do. They swallowed. I'm not strong like you. I shook my head. I wasn't strong either, I said. I just didn't have a choice. We talked for hours. I told them everything the night on the bench. The couch, the hunger, the jobs, the guilt. They listened quietly, tears slipping down their cheeks. I thought you just moved on, they said. I thought you didn't care. I cared, I replied. I just couldn't survive and explain myself at the same time. When we hugged goodbye, it felt fragile but real. And for the first time in years, I felt something new bloom where resentment used to live. Peace. That peace didn't extend to my parents. They tried new tactics when anger didn't work. My mother sent a letter, a physical letter. She wrote about sacrifice, about sleepless nights, about how hard it was to raise children, about how I had broken her heart. She never once apologized. I didn't respond. Then my father tried reason. He sent a long email about moving forward and letting go of the past. He suggested therapy together. I deleted it because letting go had always meant me forgiving them without accountability. I was done doing emotional labor for people who refused to acknowledge harm. Months passed. Life stabilized again. I focused on work, on friends, on the quiet joy of coming home to a place where no one could throw me out. And then, unexpectedly, something shifted. I got an offer, a better job, in a different city, more money, more growth, more distance. I accepted without hesitation. When I told my sibling, they smiled subtly. They're going to lose it, they said. I know, I replied. And for the first time, the thought didn't scare me because the person I was becoming no longer needed their approval to exist. And soon, they would learn something else. Not everyone you discard stays hungry forever. I didn't announce my move. I updated my address, packed my things, and told only the people who needed to know. No dramatic goodbyes, no final speeches, just quiet preparation and forward motion. The funny thing about leaving when you've already been abandoned is that it feels less like loss and more like momentum. The new city was bigger, louder, colder in some ways, but honest. No one there knew my family. No one had expectations of who I was supposed to be or how grateful I was supposed to feel. I rented a small apartment near my new job. It wasn't perfect, but it was mine. Again, on my first night there, I sat on the floor with takeout containers and laughed out loud. Alone because for once, the silence felt earned. They found out I'd moved through social media, of course. My mother messaged first. You left without telling us. I stared at the screen. You left without telling us. The irony would have been funny if it hadn't been so on brand. I replied simply, I moved for work. She didn't respond for hours. Then, so now you're really gone. I typed, paused, then erased. I didn't owe her reassurance. My father called the next day. You think running away fixes things? He demanded. I didn't run, I said. I moved forward. You're tearing this family apart, he said. I smiled faintly. No, I replied. I just stopped holding it together by myself. That was the moment I realized something important. They weren't angry because I'd hurt them. They were angry because I'd stopped being available. Availability had always been my role. The holidays came again. This time, I spent them with friends who asked what I liked to eat and meant it, who laughed easily, who didn't measure my worth by what I provided. My siblings sent me a photo of our parents' table smaller this year, quieter. They keep saying you'll come around eventually. I replied, I already have. Just nod to them. Then came the final attempt, a public one. My mother posted online about children who forget their roots, about sacrifice without gratitude, about how some people mistake independence for cruelty, People commented with sympathy, with praise, with prayers. I didn't engage. I didn't defend myself. I didn't need to. Because the truth is, when you stop begging to be understood, people notice. A distant cousin reached out privately. I saw the post. Something feels off. If you ever want to talk, I'm here. I thanked them. But I didn't need to explain anymore. I had told my story to the person who mattered most, myself. Months passed. Life grew fuller, quieter, better. And then one evening, as I cooked dinner in my new kitchen, my phone buzzed. A message from my mother. Short, uncharacteristically so. We're not doing well. I stirred the pot slowly. I thought of the bench, the couch, the hunger. I thought of the dinner I'd cooked them, the truth they couldn't swallow. And for the first time, I felt no urge to respond. Because sometimes, the most powerful thing you can feed people who taught you to starve is silence. Silence can be deafening if you're used to the noise of control. I kept my life moving forward, unbothered, while the messages from my parents dwindled. My mother tried the occasional guilt text. We raised you. How can you ignore us? We're still family. You owe us. I read them, nodded to myself, and deleted them. My father tried one last attempt, asking for a meeting to talk things through. I declined politely, with no remorse. What they never understood was that the thing they could never get back from me wasn't money, wasn't attention, wasn't obedience. It wasn't even the care I could have given them. It was trust. Years of survival had taught me something their love never could. Love is earned. And when it's conditional, it's not love at all, it's a transaction. Every time I fed myself, every night I lay down without fearing I'd be forced onto the street again, I reclaimed a piece of myself that they tried to sell for their comfort. And that was priceless. A few months into my new life, I got a promotion. More money, better hours, recognition at work. I celebrated quietly, alone, but with full joy. Not for them. Not to prove anything. For me. It was then I realized something cruel, but satisfying. Everything they had dismissed as inconsequential, me surviving, me thriving, was now untouchable by them. The things they took for granted, mocked, or erased from memory, were mine, fully and forever. I could never give them back the years I spent hungry, afraid, or invisible. They couldn't demand my gratitude for the life they tried to control. They couldn't take back the independence I had forged from pain. That dinner I'd given them years ago, the one where they ate the meal I cooked while recounting the debt of survival, had been a subtle demonstration, a lesson they still hadn't fully digested. I could feed them, but it would never be the same. They could eat, but the nourishment was mine to control. It was the first time I understood the depth of power in survival. Power I had claimed quietly, one hardship at a time. And in that moment, I laughed softly to myself. Not because I was cruel, but because, for the first time in my life, I had the upper hand, and I didn't need them to admit it to feel complete. The first call came on a gray Wednesday morning. My phone buzzed on the counter while I brewed coffee. The ringtone familiar yet foreign, my father's name flashing on the screen. I stared at it, cup in hand, heart calm. For years, a call from him would have sent me spiraling panic, guilt, fear, but now, I didn't flinch. I didn't jump. I didn't need to answer. I let it ring. It stopped. 2 minutes later, a text followed. Call me back. This is important. I ignored it. By the end of the day, there were 4 more calls and 3 more texts, each escalating in tone, polite, then anxious, then desperate. We need to talk. It's serious. Your mother isn't well, please. We're in trouble. Can you help? Asterisk. I didn't respond. Not once. Days passed. Then came the grapevine reports. From distant relatives, friends who had stayed in touch. My parents were in debt. Their house was in jeopardy. They were forced to sell furniture, cut off luxuries, tighten the screws of survival they had once demanded from me. My siblings were working multiple jobs, exhausted and bitter, and occasionally muttering my name with resentment. It should have thrilled me, the universe turning the tables, but strangely, it didn't. I felt nothing. I didn't gloat. I didn't rejoice. I didn't pick up the phone to gloat. I just continued living my life, and that, I realized, was the ultimate leverage. The calls they couldn't make, the ones asking me to step back into their lives, to rescue them, to feed them, as they had once fed me, were now powerless. They couldn't reach me emotionally anymore. They couldn't pull me into guilt. They couldn't touch the independence I had carved out. Months later, they tried again. A letter arrived, neatly typed, each word carefully designed to manipulate. Dear my name, we know we hurt you, and we're sorry for the things we cannot take back. We are asking for help, not for ourselves alone, but for the family we have built. Please consider. I read it, then set it aside. For the first time, I realized the full scope of what they had lost, their ability to control me, to demand from me, to twist my compassion into obligation. They had taught me to be grateful for scraps, and now, years later, I was feeding them in ways they could neither swallow nor comprehend. And the calls, letters, and desperate texts, they couldn't reach the one place that mattered anymore. My mind, my peace, my autonomy. I smiled quietly. Because the calls they couldn't make were calls that never would. It wasn't planned. Not at first. I had returned to my hometown for a work conference, staying at a hotel far enough from my old neighborhood that I wouldn't run into anyone I knew. I told myself it was coincidence, logistics, and nothing more. But life has a way of forcing intersections. On the second evening, I went out for a quiet dinner alone. Just me, a small table, and a plate of pasta I didn't have to share. I was enjoying the quiet, the kind of freedom I'd earned, but then I saw them through the glass doors, standing awkwardly by the hostess podium. My mother, my father, my siblings, dressed neatly, forced smiles plastered on their faces, scanning the restaurant as if hunting for someone. I froze. They didn't see me yet. They were too busy whispering, glancing at the door, clutching the table menus like life rafts. I considered leaving. I considered turning back. But something inside me, a combination of years of restraint, survival, and quiet power, made me stay. They spotted me finally. My mother's eyes went wide. My father's jaw tightened. My siblings stiffened. They approached cautiously, like one approaches a wild animal they once thought tame. My name, my mother began, voice fragile, almost pleading. We didn't know you'd be here. I held up a hand. Sit, I said. They froze. I'll hear you out, I continued, calm. But only one thing. I decide the terms here. They blinked, hesitated, then sat. It was surreal. Seeing them, they're the people who had kicked me out. The people who had demanded gratitude for scraps. The people who had tried to erase me, sitting quietly while I held the authority. My father cleared his throat. We didn't realize how much you've done. How independent you've become. I nodded slowly. Yes, I said. I built a life without you. Without your approval. Without your interference. They exchanged looks. My mother's lip trembled. We were wrong, my father said. Stop, I interrupted. Don't try to explain. Don't try to justify. Just acknowledge it. He swallowed. We were wrong, he repeated, quieter this time. I let that settle. Let the weight of years of neglect, pain, and survival linger in the air. And then I smiled. You finally understand, don't you? I said. That feeding me wasn't love, and being fed isn't loyalty. They flinched. You wanted me to be grateful for scraps, I continued. And now you sit here, hungry not just for food, but for the thing you can't take, respect, autonomy, truth. And you can't have it. My mother's hand shook as she reached for hers. We thought you'd forgive, she stammered. I shook my head. I forgave myself, I said. And that's all I needed. You're still learning the hard way. I stood. Dinner's over, I said. You're welcome to sit and eat. But the lesson isn't mine to teach anymore. I turned, walked past them, and left. They didn't follow. They didn't call. They didn't reach out again that evening. And for the first time, I realized something profound. The reunion they never expected wasn't about reconciling. It was about me reclaiming my seat at the table of life, leaving them to finally confront their own hunger. And as I walked into the night, the city lights glowing around me, I felt lighter than I had in years. Because finally, after everything, the people who taught me to starve were the ones left wanting, and I was full. Months passed after that reunion. Life continued in my new city. Richer not just in money, but in the quiet, steady peace I had built. I had friends who cared, a job I loved, and evenings filled with the small luxuries of choice. What to eat, when to sleep, who to spend time with. Then came the opportunity. It arrived suddenly at first. A family event, the kind I had no obligation to attend. A wedding. My parents' cousin was getting married. And through mutual contacts, my mother found out I would be in town. Suddenly, my presence mattered. Suddenly, I was invited. They weren't asking, they were expecting. I smiled quietly when the invitation landed in my inbox. They really think they get to dictate terms now, I thought. IRSVPD. Not yes, not no, simply attending. On the night of the wedding, I arrived alone. Dressed simply, elegantly, nothing extravagant but clearly put together. I watched my family from across the hall. My mother noticed me immediately, her eyes widening, scanning me as if I had grown overnight into someone untouchable. My father's jaw tightened. My siblings looked anywhere but at me, nervous and guilty. The meal began. I watched them eat. The appetizers arrived, the first courses, the drinks flowing freely. Their eyes occasionally darted toward me, calculating. They whispered, subtly, their heads bending toward one another, as if sharing a strategy. I let them whisper. I let them stare. Because this meal wasn't about feeding them. It never had been. It was about reminding them exactly what they had lost. I waited until dessert. A chocolate tart, rich and decadent, presented individually on fine china. I called over the waiter. Bring for more, I said. They froze. 4, my father asked. Exactly 4, I said. 1 for each of you. The plates arrived. I motioned for them to come forward. They hesitated. Then my mother, curiosity battling caution, led the way. I stood behind the dessert table, quietly observing as they took their seats. Go on, I said, eat. They dug in, cautiously at first, then with more confidence. Each bite deliberate, each glance at me nervous. I didn't interfere. I didn't speak. I just watched. And then I told them the rules. You will finish what's on your plates. You will enjoy it if you can. And when you are done, I paused, letting the weight of my words settle. You will remember who provided it. Not just this dessert, but the life that made you capable of enjoying it. My mother's fork trembled. My father's grip tightened around his napkin. My siblings ate in silence, uneasily. Like every bite reminded them of debts they could never repay. I let them eat, slowly, watching, counting each bite. Because I wanted them to understand that nourishment, when given freely, is not an obligation, it's power. Halfway through, my mother set down her fork. This is wonderful, she whispered. We are grateful. I smiled faintly. Grateful is not the word, I said. You were given sustenance. You didn't earn it. You didn't suffer for it. You didn't survive. And that's the point. My father's face went red. You're cruel, he spat. I shook my head. No, I said softly. I'm fed. And now you've eaten something you could never swallow before. The truth that I don't need you. That I thrived without you. And that your entitlement cannot touch me. They went silent. Forks hovered midair, eyes fixed on me in disbelief. I let them sit there, discomfort simmering like the richest sauce. Their mouths full of sweetness they couldn't digest emotionally. By the end of the night, they had eaten. And they had understood. Whether they wanted to admit it or not, that power had shifted. I left the table quietly, slipping out into the night with the satisfaction of someone who had delivered justice not with force, but with a simple, elegant meal, a feast they could not swallow. The next morning, the city was quiet. I sat at my kitchen table, coffee steaming in my hands, and let myself breathe fully for the first time in decades. I thought about everything, the bench, the couch, the hunger, the trash bags. I thought about the nights I'd cried alone, the jobs I'd taken just to keep a roof over my head, the meals I'd cooked with pennies and pride. And I realized something profound. The story hadn't been about revenge. It had been about survival, about claiming the life that was mine from the very start, about feeding myself when no one else would, about finally sitting at a table where I dictated the terms, and everyone else had to wait. News trickled in. My parents were managing, barely. My siblings had settled into routines of their own, tired and humbled. My mother had sent one last email, carefully crafted, apologetic in tone yet still clinging to remnants of entitlement. I deleted it unread. I didn't need closure from them anymore. I had closure from myself. Weeks later, I received a message from my youngest sibling. Thank you for showing us what strength really looks like. I hope one day I can be half as brave as you. I smiled, tears threatening, but not falling. That was enough. That was my reward. Someone finally understood, not my parents, not my aunts or cousins, but someone I could genuinely teach by example. Life continued. I built my home, my career, my friendships. I traveled. I celebrated my victories quietly, but fully. Every time I walked through my door, alone or with friends, I felt the weight of independence settle over me like a warm blanket. And in moments of reflection, I realized something even deeper. The people who tried to starve me had inadvertently given me the most important lesson of all. You cannot control the lives of those who refuse to be controlled. I had fed myself first. I had survived. I had grown. And when I finally chose to feed them, it was on my terms. They could not digest it, because they had spent years teaching me to eat only when allowed. Now, I was full, truly full. And for the first time, I knew the taste of freedom, and it was sweeter than anything they had ever given me, or could ever take away. Because I had learned the ultimate truth. Being fed doesn't make you alive. Feeding yourself fully, fiercely, and freely, that is life. And I had never been more alive.